how to remember your soul contract, your life's mission. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. These powerful words by Carl Jung invite us to question everything we think we know about why we're here. What if your struggles, your family, your deepest longings, even your pain were not random, but part of a sacred soul contract? In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we're diving deep into the truth about your soul contract and why you didn't come here by accident. You came with a purpose, and it's time to remember it. Have you ever felt like you were meant for something more? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Your story might be the key someone else needs to awaken their own. Let's begin this journey together. 1. Pain as a portal to awakening. You weren't born into your family or your story by accident. The pain you experienced, the neglect, the silence, the emotional distance was not a random misfortune. It was part of a deeper architecture designed by your soul long before you arrived here. That ache you've carried, the feeling of being unseen or misunderstood, is not something to hide or numb. It is a coded message, a divine activation, meant to awaken something ancient and powerful within you. Many spiritual teachings suggest that before we are born, our soul chooses its family, its environment, and even its deepest challenges, not as punishment, but as preparation. Your soul understood that in order to remember who you truly are, you would need to walk through certain fires. The absence of love was not a void, but a mirror. The rejection you endured wasn't a closed door. It was a sacred nudge inward, pushing you toward yourself. That father who couldn't love you, that mother who couldn't protect you, the childhood that felt more like survival than safety, these were not cosmic errors. They were soul assignments. You came here to transmute pain into power, silence into clarity, abandonment into sovereignty. And yet, for years, you may have mistaken your suffering as evidence that something was wrong with you. But Carl Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What you called fate may have actually been your contract, and within that contract, nothing was random. The betrayal at 17, the heartbreak at 30, the loneliness that kept returning at 45 were soul initiations, portals meant to break your ego and awaken your essence. Because the soul doesn't evolve through ease. It evolves through resistance, through the discomfort that stretches your awareness beyond the surface of survival and into the depths of remembrance. There is a sacred intelligence behind your wounds. They taught you to see what others miss. They sharpened your discernment. They deepened your compassion. That deep ache in your chest, that was your soul knocking. That feeling of being misplaced in your own life, it was your inner self waiting to be reclaimed. The masculine path has often been reduced to performance achievement, status, control. But the real initiation of a man begins when those things collapse, and all that remains is the question, who am I without the mask? That is when the soul contract reveals itself. It whispers in the silence. It speaks in the moments when you finally stop trying to fix yourself and instead begin to listen. Not to the noise of the world, but to the wisdom buried inside your own suffering. Your childhood patterns, your repeated relationship wounds, your moments of self-doubt, they are not signs of failure. They are threads of a larger design. You came here to break generational cycles, to alchemize trauma, to remember your worth, not from applause, but from presence. And everything you've lived through was preparing you for that remembrance. You didn't come here to get it all right. You came to get real. Real with your story. Real with your shadow. Real with your soul. Because only then can the contract be fulfilled not as a burden, but as a breakthrough. The soul doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in patterns, symbols, synchronicities. And if you're paying attention, those very moments you wanted to forget may hold the keys to everything your soul came here to do. Have you ever seen your pain as a doorway to awakening? If so, share how it shaped your journey in the comments. Your story might guide someone else. If not, comment, "I'm ready to awaken," so we can walk this path of healing and transformation together. 2. The soul contract and pre-birth design. Many spiritual traditions speak of a soul contract, an energetic agreement made before birth, a sacred decision where your soul chose specific people, situations, and experiences not by mistake, but by divine design. Carl Jung's insight that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, reminds us that what appears as random suffering or coincidence is often part of a much deeper plan. The parents you were born to, the heartbreaks you endured, and the parts of yourself you struggled to understand are not flaws in the system, but essential pieces of your soul's blueprint. These were not punishments, but portals for awakening. Each moment of pain meant to push you towards self-realization, each silence teaching you the value of your own voice, and each longing directing you back to your purpose. Your soul didn't come here to have a perfect life. It came to evolve through contrast, through shadow, through the discomfort of imperfect love. Take, for example, a man named David. He lost his job, went through a painful divorce, and found himself questioning everything. But in the darkness, something stirred. Instead of staying broken, he started asking deeper questions, writing, reflecting, and reconnecting with forgotten parts of himself. That breakdown became his breakthrough. Today, he helps others find meaning in their own pain, not because life got easier, but because he now understands that his suffering had meaning. That's the soul contract in motion. It's the unseen agreement your soul makes with the universe to grow through certain experiences that might not make sense at the surface level, but carry deep spiritual intelligence underneath. Just like how a seed must break open to grow, your soul often needs the pressure of adversity to awaken its full potential. Carl Jung believed that our healing begins when we uncover the unconscious patterns that shape our reality, when we stop running from our wounds and instead meet them with presence. Your soul chose this exact path, this particular set of challenges, because it trusted you to remember who you really are, not despite the pain, but because of it. Everything you've been through has been asking you to wake up, to stop seeing your life as a series of random events and start honoring it as a sacred curriculum. That ache you carry, that relationship that left you raw, that chapter of confusion, they're all invitations. Your soul didn't come here to be passive. It came to participate, to transform, to turn every scar into a symbol of strength. The lesson is this: trust that nothing is wasted, that even the detours were part of the map, and that within every disappointment lives a deeper initiation into who you're meant to become. You were never without a guide. Your soul has been whispering all along. It's time to listen. 3. Trauma as initiation, not tragedy. Your deepest wounds, those moments of abandonment, neglect, or emotional silence, are not random tragedies, but sacred messages encoded in your soul's journey. What you once believed were signs that something was wrong with you are, in truth, signals that something deeply spiritual is unfolding within you. Pain has never been your enemy. It has always been your teacher. The emotional gaps left by those who failed to love you properly weren't meant to destroy you. They were meant to awaken the voice of your soul. In the absence of comfort, you discovered resilience. In the silence of neglect, you were invited to hear your own truth. In abandonment, you were asked to remember that you were never truly alone. Every ache, every scar, every unanswered cry became a doorway into your own becoming. And behind every door was not punishment, but preparation. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But what if the very pain you've been trying to forget is the unconscious invitation to remember who you really are? Through the lens of spiritual wisdom, trauma stops being a prison and becomes a passage. It doesn't just happen to you, it happens for you. When you stop asking, "Why me?" and begin to ask, "What now?" you shift from victim to visionary. Because your soul did not come here by accident. Long before you entered this world, your soul agreed to a contract, a spiritual blueprint filled with the precise experiences you would need to grow, evolve, and awaken. Those who hurt you, those who left you, even those who failed to see you, may have all been part of that contract, not as villains, but as catalysts. Their actions may have pierced your heart, but they also cracked it open wide enough for the light to enter. Pain becomes sacred when it has a purpose. And your purpose is not to carry your wounds like burdens, but to transform them into wisdom. Just as the lotus blooms from the mud, your spiritual strength rises from the dark waters of your past. You do not need to keep reliving the trauma, but you must stop rejecting the lessons it came to teach. Everything in your life, every broken relationship, every betrayal, every silent night was not a sign that you were unworthy, but a sacred initiation into self-recognition. The soul speaks through symbols, through patterns, through discomfort that refuses to be ignored. If you feel lost, it is not because you are off path, but because your path is leading you inward. True healing begins the moment you stop running from your pain and start honoring it. Every wound you've endured has sharpened your intuition, deepened your empathy, and expanded your inner wisdom. You are not here to repeat the suffering, but to break the pattern and guide others through it. Your life is not an accident. It is a carefully crafted curriculum in spiritual evolution. And if your pain still echoes inside you, it's not because you're weak. It's because your soul is still speaking, still calling, still waiting for you to remember that the pain was never the end. It was the beginning. Have your wounds shaped who you are? If this message resonates with you, comment, "I accept the initiation below," to honor your healing path and soul awakening. 4. Repeating patterns as messages. Life doesn't repeat itself to punish you. It repeats itself to wake you up. When the same heartbreak, the same betrayal, the same dead-end opportunity shows up again and again, it's not coincidence, it's communication. These recurring experiences are not just events. They are soul-level messages trying to break through the noise of your day-to-day life. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What you call bad luck, your soul calls a lesson. These patterns are not failures. They're invitations. Invitations to stop running, to stop blaming others, to stop numbing yourself with distractions, and finally turn inward. Because within every painful loop is a soul contract that you have yet to rewrite, an agreement made in energy, not words, long before you entered this life. You may not remember signing it, but your life keeps reminding you of it. And until you learn what it came to teach you, it will return in different forms, through different people, wearing different masks, but always delivering the same ache. Sometimes, your soul chooses discomfort over ease, heartbreak over harmony, so that you can learn something deeper than surface happiness. Maybe you had to experience rejection over and over, not because you're unworthy, but because your soul wanted you to finally stop outsourcing your value to the opinions of others. Maybe financial instability wasn't a punishment, but a trigger for an inner code asking you to break generational scarcity patterns. The soul grows not through perfection, but through the messy, confusing, emotional experiences we often try to avoid. And when you start seeing your patterns not as misfortunes, but as soul curricula, you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" That shift in perspective is the beginning of real healing. It's how you alchemize pain into wisdom. It's how you turn your past into power. These contracts are not fixed. They're dynamic. Your soul didn't come here with a rigid script. It came with a blueprint, one that can evolve with every conscious choice you make. The moment you decide to pause and observe your repeating story instead of reacting to it, you begin the process of spiritual editing. You are not stuck. You are being called. And every time something breaks you open, it's because something inside you is ready to rise. Repetition doesn't mean failure. It means you're being offered another chance to meet yourself more deeply. And if you dare to listen, if you dare to sit with your discomfort and decode what your soul is asking for, you'll discover that you were never cursed. You were chosen. Chosen to awaken. Chosen to heal. Chosen to remember what your soul has always known. 5. Turning pain into purpose. The moment you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" you begin to reclaim your power, not just mentally, but spiritually. This shift in perspective marks the beginning of something profound. The realization that your pain isn't here to punish you. It's here to shape you. According to Carl Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, the patterns you repeat, the pain you revisit, the relationships that mirror your wounds, none of them are accidents. They are invitations, encoded in your soul contract, guiding you to remember who you truly are beneath the surface of suffering. Life doesn't just happen to you. It unfolds through you. Every repeated hardship is a lesson you haven't yet integrated, not a sign of failure, but a whisper from your soul saying, "There's something here for you to see." There's a man named Michael who lived this truth. In his early 40s, he realized that every relationship he entered felt emotionally distant, hollow, and ultimately painful, just like the one he had with his father growing up. At first, he blamed others, but eventually, He sat with the pattern and asked the hard question, "What is this teaching me?" That moment of honesty changed everything. He began to see that his unresolved wound of abandonment was drawing him toward people who mirrored that same absence. The pain wasn't random. It was a mirror reflecting the parts of him that still needed healing. This is how life works. It repeats the lesson until you learn from it. And when you do, the pain transforms from a prison into a portal. Repetition isn't proof of your brokenness. It's evidence that life is trying to wake you up, to prepare you for something greater. You are not broken. You are being refined. You are not a victim of random suffering. You are a soul in the process of remembering its contract. That contract, written not in ink, but in energy, contains everything your soul came here to master. The silence you endured, the love that felt like absence, the roles you were forced to play, all of it was by design, not to diminish you, but to initiate you into deeper awareness. Your spiritual growth depends on how you respond to these invitations. Carl Jung understood that what we resist persists, and only when we confront our inner world do we begin to access true transformation. The moment you stop running and start listening, your suffering begins to speak. And in that conversation, you discover your purpose. This isn't about romanticizing pain. It's about recognizing its purpose. When you begin to see your pain as a sacred teacher instead of a cruel enemy, you shift into alignment with your soul. You stop feeling like life is happening to you and start realizing it's happening for you. Every wound becomes a doorway. Every setback, a redirection. Every breakdown, a breakthrough in disguise. You didn't come here by accident. Your soul chose this path, these people, this timeline, not for ease, but for evolution. So when life brings the same lesson again and again, it's not to destroy you. It's to make sure you remember who you really are beneath the conditioning. And that remembering is your liberation. Let your pain point the way home. Let it wake you up, not wear you down. Because your soul has always known the way. Now it's just your turn to listen. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments below. What painful pattern are you now ready to turn into purpose? Let's grow through this together. 6. Remembering your true self. Your soul has never been silent. It has always spoken in a spiritual language far deeper than words, echoing through intuition, synchronicities, unexplained longings, and quiet inner nudges you were taught to ignore. Those moments you felt something was meant for you, even when logic said otherwise, or when you walked away from something that looked perfect on paper but felt wrong in your gut that wasn't doubt. That was your soul remembering. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And perhaps that's why so many people feel lost, not because they lack purpose, but because they've forgotten to listen. You weren't sent here to become someone new, but to return to who you already are beneath the layers of conditioning, disappointment, and distraction. Every mask you've worn, every role you've played to fit in, to survive, to be loved, has buried your true essence but not destroyed it. It's still there, waiting to be remembered. In the stillness of meditation or the sacred silence of a soul-searching walk, you begin to touch that essence again. Not with your mind, but with your being. Your spiritual contract, The energetic agreement you made before incarnating starts to stir within you, not in grand revelations, but in subtle moments when something finally feels true. You didn't come here by accident. The people who challenge you, the wounds that ache, the gifts you carry without trying, they're not random. They're part of the design your soul chose to grow through. This isn't about destiny being rigid or fixed. It's about understanding that your path is not supposed to look like anyone else's, because your contract is uniquely yours. And so, when you feel like you don't belong, like you see the world in ways others don't, like you're carrying a weight that has no name, understand that you are not broken, you are awakening. You are remembering the spiritual reason you came here. Not to impress, not to perform, but to embody truth. To speak love in places of fear. To hold light where others only see darkness. To trust your inner voice, even when the world around you is too loud to hear it. The signs are always there, waiting for you to pause long enough to see them repeating numbers. Dreams that won't let go. A sentence in a book that feels like it was written just for you. These are not coincidences. They are reminders that your soul still remembers the way. And when you begin to follow these signs, not with urgency, but with presence, you shift. Not into someone new, but into someone real. This is the return, the healing, the sacred remembering. Spiritual awakening is not an escape from life, but a return to it, a deeper, more conscious engagement with what's always been there. It's the moment you stop asking what the world wants from you and start asking what your soul has been longing to express. It's the art of living, not from the surface, but from the source. And as you remember, your life becomes less about chasing and more about aligning, less about proving and more about being. This is what it means to remember your soul contract. And once you do, you'll never see yourself or this world the same way again. 7. Your gifts were never flaws. What you once believed were flaws, your sensitivity, your empathy, your emotional depth, were never meant to be hidden. These were never accidents of your personality. They were intentional selections written into your soul's blueprint long before your first breath. The world may have taught you to silence them, to tuck them away behind performance, logic, and control. But these qualities are not burdens. They are sacred instruments your soul chose for its mission. In a culture that often rewards emotional detachment and praises the illusion of invulnerability, feeling deeply can feel like a curse. But what if the pain you suppressed was actually your soul trying to speak? What if the very ache you carry is the beginning of your awakening, not the evidence of your weakness? Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Your unconscious was never empty. It was overflowing with a sacred agreement, a soul contract you made with life itself. And that agreement required you to carry certain traits, even if the world never validated them. The sensitivity that made you feel like an outsider is what allows you to hear what others ignore. The empathy that overwhelmed you in crowded rooms is the very thing that will help you touch people where words alone cannot. The depth that made you question everything was never a flaw. It was the gateway to wisdom, to clarity, to truth. These qualities were not given to you as obstacles. They were given to guide you, to help you remember that your soul didn't come here to follow someone else's script. It came to write its own. And for that, it needed tools that wouldn't always be understood, especially by a world that values noise over nuance. But it's in the quiet, in the ache, in the private wrestlings of your own heart, that the soul often speaks loudest. You were never meant to just survive. You were meant to feel fully, love deeply, and live with purpose. The wounds you carry are not shameful. They are sacred. They are portals to something greater. They are the chapters your soul needs to walk through in order to carry the message only you can deliver. Your spiritual assignment was never about becoming someone else. It was about becoming fully yourself. And that self includes everything you tried to hide. The anger you swallowed, the tears you blinked away, the softness you buried under toughness, none of it was ever lost. It was waiting for you to stop running and start listening. Not to the world, but to the whisper of your soul. That quiet voice that says, "These aren't flaws. These are gifts. These are the very reasons you were chosen to walk this path. Not despite your pain, but because of it." The soul does not evolve through pretending. It evolves through honoring the sensitivity, the depth, the ache, and the longing, not as mistakes, but as sacred signals that you're finally remembering the truth of who you are. Do you feel it too, that your sensitivity is sacred, not shameful? If you do, declare it in the comments. My gifts are sacred. I will no longer hide them. And if this message spoke to your soul, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your light with others. 8. Every relationship has a role in your evolution. Every relationship, no matter how painful or confusing, holds a sacred place in your spiritual journey. According to Carl Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This means that the people who trigger your deepest wounds are not accidents. They are soul contracts, predestined guides whose purpose is to awaken you to your own healing. That friend who vanished when you needed them most, the lover who couldn't love you back, or the family member whose silence felt like abandonment. They were not detours, but part of your divine curriculum. They cracked something open in you, and through that fracture, light began to seep in. The pain wasn't the problem, it was the teacher. It showed you where your inner child still cries, where your boundaries collapse, where your self-worth is still conditional. One man once shared how his divorce left him shattered, unable to sleep or even recognize himself. But over time, in the loneliness, he met a version of himself he had long buried, the little boy who had never felt good enough unless he was needed. That realization didn't come from a therapist's office or a motivational seminar. It came from sitting in the raw truth of his pain. It was through the heartbreak that his soul finally found its voice. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that the relationships that activate our emotional pain are often the ones that reveal our shadow, the parts of us we reject, suppress, or deny. These are not enemies. They are the sacred mirrors showing you where love still needs to reach. When you stop asking why this is happening to you and start asking what it's revealing about you, your soul steps into its own power. Growth often doesn't come through harmony. It comes through friction. When a person enters your life and stirs up rage, grief, jealousy, or fear, don't rush to cut them off or escape the discomfort. Sit with it. Ask, what am I being shown? What pattern is this reflecting back to me? Because life will keep sending you similar people in different forms until you finally integrate the lesson. That's not punishment, it's spiritual persistence. Your soul contract isn't about comfort, it's about evolution. It's about becoming whole. And every relationship, no matter how temporary or tumultuous, plays a role in that sacred unfolding. The real power lies in choosing to see these connections not as personal failures, but as soul-designed assignments. When you do, everything becomes a portal to self-awareness and transformation. 9. Letting go as sacred realignment. Letting go is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough, a sacred spiritual decision to stop betraying yourself for the sake of what has already expired in your life. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment you realize that clinging to people, titles, timelines, or past versions of yourself only delays the inevitable becoming of who you truly are. Your soul knows what's real and what's expired. While the ego mourns what's lost, the soul remembers what still lives. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." So when you release what no longer aligns with your energy, you're not giving up, you're waking up. You're no longer operating in survival mode. You're choosing conscious transformation. Letting go is a spiritual act of refinement, a turning point where the noise of fear quiets enough for the truth to be heard. It's the moment you stop trying to fix what's never been yours to carry and start honoring the version of yourself that's been waiting on the other side of release. In a world that tells you to hold tighter, to keep proving, performing, pleasing, letting go becomes an act of rebellion, a sacred declaration that you are no longer willing to abandon your peace for the sake of maintaining false connections or outdated expectations. Sometimes we fear letting go because we confuse identity with attachment. But your true identity is not tied to who you were with, what you used to do, or the plans that didn't unfold. Your soul is not here to repeat, it's here to remember. And what it remembers is not the noise, the chaos, or the loss. It remembers your essence, your light, your calling. Spiritual alignment often begins with disruption. You feel the discomfort, the dissonance, the pull away from what once felt like home, but now feels too small for the soul you've become. That's not regression, it's initiation. Like seasons changing, trees shedding leaves, or rivers breaking old banks, letting go is a natural movement of the spirit making room for what is meant. So if your hands are full of things that drain your energy, release them. If your heart is tired from holding on to something out of habit, set it down. Let go, not because it's easy, but because your soul is calling you higher. There is nothing weak about release. It's sacred strength. It's the courage to choose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and authenticity over illusion. And in that surrender, you don't lose anything essential. You remember everything true. The soul never forgets its path. It simply waits for you to stop resisting it. Letting go, then, is not a death. It's a return to the spiritual self that was never lost, just buried under the weight of what you were never meant to carry. Leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss content that helps you realign with your soul's truth. Comment below. I am ready to let go and realign with what truly matters. 10. You are right on time for your becoming. You are not behind. You are not broken. And no, you didn't miss your chance. This moment, right here, right now, is the one your soul has been preparing you for all along. Every setback, every disappointment, Every delay wasn't a detour. It was alignment. It was life's way of stripping away what wasn't truly you, so that what's real could emerge. The soul doesn't measure time the way the world does. It moves through seasons of becoming. And this is the season where you remember who you are, not who you were told to be, not the image you tried to uphold, but the man your soul wrote into your spiritual contract long before you arrived on earth. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But now you are awakening to the truth. Fate is not random. It is a mirror reflecting the agreements you made on a soul level. This isn't just self-discovery. This is self-remembrance. And what you are remembering is that you came here not to perform, not to impress, not to survive, but to embody spiritual truth with every step you take. The pressure you felt, the tension between who you are and who you've pretended to be, that's not a flaw. It's a signal, a sacred whisper from within telling you it's time to stop abandoning yourself for approval. The soul was never here for performance. It was here for presence. And presence only returns when you drop the mask, when you stop trying to fit into what broke you, and when you finally choose to live from the inside out. You were never meant to be everything for everyone. You were meant to become everything you already are. The pain wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Every betrayal, every failure, every moment you thought was the end was actually the fire that refined your essence. The soul doesn't evolve in comfort. It grows in the unraveling, in the surrender, in the deep stillness where nothing external can validate you because your truth begins to validate itself. There is no deadline on becoming. There is no expiration date on awakening. The soul is patient because it knows your spiritual timing is flawless. You didn't miss anything. You've arrived exactly when you were supposed to. The world may not understand this, but your soul does. And now you do too. This isn't about starting over. It's about starting from the truth. You didn't come here by accident. You came here with a calling coded into your being, and your only job is to remember it, to honor it, to live it. Your soul has never been waiting for you to be perfect. It's been waiting for you to be real, to affirm your trust in divine timing and your own becoming. Type in the comments, "I am right on time." Let this be your declaration of alignment. And if this message resonates, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a moment of soul-deep truth. And so, as you reflect on the idea that your soul chose this path long before your first breath, remember, nothing in your life is random. The people you meet, the pain you've endured, the lessons that keep repeating each is part of a sacred contract, written not in ink, but in energy. You didn't come here by accident. You came with purpose, with intention, and with gifts the world needs. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of clarity, healing, and awakening. Your journey is just beginning. Carl Jung. 6 things highly spiritual people quit slowly. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where we guide you through the profound journey of awakening. Have you ever felt like something deep within you is shifting quietly, powerfully changing how you see the world and yourself? That's not confusing. That's a spiritual awakening. In today's video, we'll explore 6 powerful things highly spiritual people begin to let go of as they align with their true essence. These changes aren't always easy, but they are necessary for growth, freedom, and deeper happiness. Which one of these are you currently experiencing? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you are on your journey. Let's awaken together. 1. Quitting the need for external validation. Most men spend the first half of their lives chasing validation, approval from their father, recognition from their peers, admiration from women, or applause from society. But one of the most powerful signs of a true spiritual awakening is the slow, deliberate process of quitting the need for external validation. In today's world, where social media trains us to measure our self-worth by likes, shares, and comments, it's easy to believe that your value is something others assign to you. But highly spiritual men begin to notice something deeper, that the cheers of the crowd are fickle, and their silence even more revealing. When you awaken spiritually, you start peeling back the illusion that worth is transactional or conditional. You realize that no number of followers can fill a soul that doesn't recognize its own light. As Marcus Aurelius once said, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That's the contradiction we're here to resolve. The mature spiritual man doesn't suddenly reject the world's opinions. He simply stops depending on them. He listens without attachment. He sees without reacting, because he has slowly built a deeper relationship with himself. He no longer asks, "Do they like me?" but instead, "Do I respect the man I've become?" He understands that other people's judgments are often projections of their own pain, fears, and expectations. They don't really see you. They see their own insecurities mirrored back. And when that truth sinks in, you begin to walk differently. You speak with calm confidence. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for being who you are. You stop editing yourself just to make someone else comfortable. Because at the core of every spiritual transformation is a return to authenticity, a homecoming to your own soul. In this season of spiritual awakening, you stop trying to fit into places you've outgrown. You don't need everyone to understand your path, because you finally do. You don't need to be invited to every table, because you're building your own. And the peace that comes from self-validation is not loud. It's steady, grounding, and deeply masculine. This is the kind of strength that doesn't shout. It radiates. And yes, there will still be moments when that old need for approval creeps in. But now, you're aware. Now, you pause. Now, you return to your center. So ask yourself, what part of your identity is still clinging to praise? Where are you shrinking away just to be liked? And what would your life look like if you trusted your own voice more than the noise of the crowd? That's the call. That's the daily practice. Not to prove yourself, but to know yourself. And in that knowing, you will find a freedom that no one can give you and no one can take away. Because the most sacred thing you can do is to be unapologetically yourself. Comment below, "I am me." 2. Ceasing to compromise your authentic self. There comes a moment on the path of spirituality when you realize the greatest betrayal isn't what others have done to you. It's how often you've abandoned yourself just to be accepted. And that realization hits hard. From a young age, we're taught to adjust, to blend in, to tone ourselves down so we don't rock the boat. We learn to wear masks that hide our real feelings, dreams, and personalities. At school, we mimic what's popular. At work, we bite our tongue. With family, we play roles just to keep the peace. Over time, we become experts at pleasing others, but strangers to ourselves. And while this strategy may win approval, it costs us the very thing that makes us feel alive, our authenticity. But something begins to shift when you commit to your spiritual growth. You begin to quit, slowly but surely, the habit of compromising who you are. Not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly, and with increasing clarity, you start choosing yourself. You notice how exhausting it is to smile when your heart aches, how it hurts to say yes when your soul screams no. And so, with every small act of truth, you start to reclaim the parts of you that got buried under layers of performance. This isn't selfishness. This is healing. This is spiritual awakening in motion. I once knew a woman who spent nearly 15 years hiding her love for painting. She worked in finance, followed the rules, wore the suits, and said the right things at networking events. She did everything that was expected of her. But on weekends, she painted in secret. It wasn't until she burned out completely mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that she realized she had built a life based on expectations, not passion. That moment of breakdown became her breakthrough. She didn't quit her job right away, but she started painting again. She showed her work online. She allowed people to see who she really was. And eventually, her art became her full-time calling. Not because she chased success, but because she stopped running from herself. That's what happens when you quit compromising your authentic self. You begin to align with your truth, and life starts responding in beautiful ways. You meet people who actually see you. You find spaces where you don't have to shrink to fit. You feel at peace in your own skin because you're no longer pretending. You understand that spirituality isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. And when you live from that place, you no longer seek permission to be real. You just are. So let me ask you, in what areas of your life are you still playing a role just to be accepted? And what would it feel like to live without that mask? These questions aren't meant to shame, they're meant to awaken. Because spiritual growth is a process of coming home to yourself, of honoring your voice, your feelings, your vision, even if it makes others uncomfortable, even if it means standing alone sometimes. The reward is priceless. You reclaim your joy, your energy, your integrity, and most of all, your inner peace. The lesson is clear. Don't compromise your true self. Your soul didn't come here to be a carbon copy. It came here to fully express its divine creation. So choose yourself every day. Speak your truth, live your values, and let your light shine without apology. Because the world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more authentic people. And the real you is enough. Comment below. I live my values. 3. Abandoning toxic relationships. There comes a moment in every spiritual journey when you begin to see people differently, not through judgment, but through the lens of energetic truth. You start to realize that not everyone who walks with you is meant to go the whole way. Some relationships, though familiar or long-standing, begin to feel heavy. They no longer feed your soul. Instead, they drain your energy. dampen your spirit, and subtly pull you back into cycles you've worked hard to rise above. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you become more spiritually aware, you stop calling unhealthy patterns fate and start recognizing them as choices. You become more conscious of the people who consistently dismiss your boundaries, invalidate your experiences, or seem to thrive when you shrink yourself. And with that spiritual wisdom comes a quiet but firm resolve that says, "I love you, but I love myself too." You no longer feel obligated to keep relationships out of guilt, fear of conflict, or the illusion that your worth is tied to how much you can endure. Instead, you begin the slow but necessary process of quitting toxic relationships. Not always with anger, not always with drama, sometimes just with silence, space, and a firm decision not to keep exposing yourself to emotional harm. And yes, it can hurt. Sometimes the ones you need to walk away from are people you've laughed with, cried with, even dreamed with. But spiritual growth isn't just about light and peace, it's about truth. And the truth is, if someone consistently diminishes your light, they are not meant to stay in your sacred space. This is where spiritual wisdom becomes your compass. You learn to choose discomfort over betrayal of self. You learn that it's not your job to save people from the consequences of their energy. You learn that loyalty should never cost you your inner peace. When you let go of what no longer aligns, you make room for relationships that honor who you are becoming. You begin to attract people who nourish your soul. Those rare souls who see your growth and celebrate it, not resent it. People who hold you accountable with love, who stand beside you with kindness, and who walk with you, not ahead of you or behind you, because they understand the sacred balance of mutual growth. Carl Jung also said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." So ask yourself, are your current relationships transforming you, or are they diminishing you? Do they inspire your growth, or subtly sabotage it? This is not about labeling people as good or bad. It's about being radically honest about what your soul needs to thrive. Spiritual awakening calls you to love without attachment, to forgive without reopening doors, and to recognize that not every bond is sacred simply because it's old. What if your next level requires solitude before it reveals your true spiritual tribe? What if the people you're afraid to lose are the very weight holding you back from flight? So I ask you, what kind of energy are you allowing into your sacred space? And are you willing to let go of what no longer serves your highest good? Because in the end, your peace is the most spiritual thing you'll ever protect, and walking away is sometimes the loudest form of self-love there is. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. 4. Releasing the need for control. There's a powerful line from Carl Jung that says, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." And if there's one thing that highly spiritual people slowly quit as they awaken, it's the illusion that they must always be in control. At first, it feels natural to want to manage every outcome, to orchestrate life like a chessboard, where every move is calculated to prevent failure, disappointment, or pain. But beneath that desire lies a deep-rooted fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of losing what you love. Fear of letting things fall apart. What the spiritual awakening teaches you, however, is that control is not the anchor it pretends to be. It is the very chain that keeps you bound to suffering. As you begin to walk the spiritual path, you slowly start to see the truth that trying to control everything only leads to resistance, stress, and disconnection from your deeper self. You begin to understand that there's a current far greater than your ego's agenda, a divine intelligence that moves through every moment, even the chaotic ones, and the more you try to override it, the more friction you create within yourself. That's when the shift begins, not in a single moment, but over time, like the tide slowly turning. You begin to trust. You stop fighting against the uncertainty and instead lean into it with grace. You start setting intentions not to force life, but to co-create with it. You take action, not from fear, but from alignment. And then you do something radical. You surrender. Not in weakness, but in power. Because surrender is not about giving up. It's about letting go of your attachment to how things must unfold. And in doing so, you free yourself from anxiety. You begin to realize that life is not something to be grasped with a white fist, but something to be danced with. You realize that your spiritual growth does not require you to dominate every situation. It requires you to trust that whatever happens to you is part of a deeper lesson that your soul is ready to receive. And yes, that kind of trust takes courage, especially for men who have been raised to believe that control equals power. But really, there is nothing more powerful than a man who can embrace uncertainty without letting it crush him. This is spiritual wisdom in action, learning to let go of control, not because you don't care, but because you have finally understood that life is too sacred, too vast, too alive to be bound by your expectations. So let me ask you this. What part of your life are you still trying to control? And what would happen if you simply surrendered it to something greater? This is the kind of spiritual awakening that neither screams nor whispers. It does not demand, it invites. And it does not lead to chaos, but to the quiet power of peace. You were never meant to carry the universe on your shoulders. You can only trust its rhythm and grow with its flow. Comment below. I became the best version of myself. 5. Letting go of material attachments. When you're on a path of spiritual growth, one of the most profound shifts you'll slowly experience is the letting go of material attachments. Society has conditioned us from a very young age to chase after visible symbols of success: money, luxury cars, massive homes, expensive watches, designer labels. We're taught to believe that the more we have, the more we are. But here's the truth that many people miss until they begin awakening spiritually. Those things are not the source of lasting fulfillment. They're temporary highs that fade quickly, like smoke in the wind. And as you continue to grow in spirituality, you begin to see that the real measure of abundance is not how much you can accumulate, but how deeply you can feel joy without needing anything external to validate it. Think about it. When was the last time you felt truly happy because of a thing? Not the moment you bought it, but days, weeks, or months later? Most likely, that excitement faded. That's because true contentment lives inside you, not in what you own. It's in the peace of your own mind, the sincerity of your relationships, the quiet stillness of the morning sun on your skin. Let me share a story. A man I once knew had climbed the corporate ladder, had a big house, and a 6-figure income, but deep down, he felt hollow. One day, after a health scare, He sold almost everything, moved to a smaller place by the mountains, and started mentoring young people. He told me, "I finally feel rich because I wake up with purpose, not pressure." That's the difference spiritual growth makes. Letting go of material attachment doesn't mean you have to give up nice things or live like a monk. It means you're no longer defined by them. You can enjoy what you have, but you don't need it to feel worthy. You stop chasing trends and start chasing truth. You shift your focus from having more to being more. You simplify your life not out of sacrifice, but out of clarity. You start clearing your space and your soul because you now crave what feeds your spirit rather than stuffing your closet. So I ask you, what things in your life did you think you needed that now feel like a burden? How has your relationship with material possessions changed as you've grown spiritually? I'd love to hear about it, so leave a comment and share your story, because your reflection might be the mirror someone else needs. And if this message resonates with you, join us. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and be part of a community of spiritual seekers who are awakening to something much more real and lasting. Remember, letting go doesn't leave you empty. It creates space for deeper joy, stronger connection, and a life where your worth is no longer tied to what you own, but to who you are. That, my friend, is the essence of true abundance and the wealth that nothing can take away from you. Comment below. I connect with positive values. 6. Quitting the fear of death. The sixth and perhaps most transformative thing highly spiritual people quit slowly is the fear of death. And while death may seem like one of the heaviest topics to confront, it is also one of the most liberating when understood through spiritual wisdom. Carl Jung once said, "Shrinking away from death is something unhealthy and abnormal, which robs the second half of life of its purpose." For those walking the spiritual path, death is no longer viewed as a terrifying ending, but as a sacred transition, a return to the source, a shift into another dimension of being. You start to recognize that your body may be temporary, but your essence is eternal. The soul is not bound by flesh, time, or even identity. It is energy, and energy never dies. Have you ever paused and wondered why the most awakened people seem so calm in the face of loss or change? It's because they've begun to make peace with impermanence, and in doing so, they've stepped into a level of freedom most people fear to touch. As your spiritual awakening deepens, you begin to let go of the idea that your worth is tied to your achievements, your status, or even your continued physical existence. Instead, you come to embrace something far more powerful: the awareness that life itself is a sacred dance of beginnings and endings, each moment rich with meaning because it won't last forever. This acceptance shifts the way you live. You stop postponing joy, you stop fearing the future, and you stop clinging to what must inevitably pass. There's a quiet clarity that replaces the panic, a stillness that enters your soul. You begin to live not just for longevity, but for presence. You breathe deeper, speak more honestly, and love more fiercely because you know that everything is temporary, and in that temporary life, life becomes more vibrant. Isn't it strange that the less you fear death, the more alive you become? This is the essence of spiritual wisdom: to not merely cope with mortality, but to embrace it as part of the divine plan. You start trusting that you are not separate from the universe, but woven into its design. that you are guided, held, and ultimately returned home. Carl Jung believed that life is a short pause between two great mysteries, and when you live with that in mind, you no longer shrink in fear, you expand in truth. What if the fear you've been carrying isn't about death at all, but about not having lived fully while you were here? What would it mean to live as if death wasn't an enemy, but a teacher? So as you continue on your path, ask yourself, are you living in fear of the inevitable, or are you awakening to the infinite? Let this question sit with you, challenge you, open you. Because when you quit the fear of death, you don't just prepare to die. You finally begin to live well. And that, dear soul, is one of the most powerful awakenings of all. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. As we wrap up this journey through the 6 powerful things, highly spiritual people slowly let go of external validation, material attachments, the need for control, toxic relationships, the habit of compromising their true self, and the fear of death. Remember that each release brings you closer to your most authentic and awakened self. These aren't just abstract ideas. They are daily practices that can lead to real transformation and inner peace. Which of these have you started to let go of in your own life? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone on a similar path, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more soulful guidance on your spiritual awakening. Your journey matters, and we're honored to walk it with you.